right? Because people ask this question of like, how long does it take to get good, those kind of things, right? And there definitely are answers to that, right? If you wanted to get to a certain level of good, there's a certain, for you particularly from where you're at, there's a certain number of sets and certain amount of introspection around the sets that would get you there. But here's the more important question. If you go out tonight and do something intelligent and effective and work on your game, will you be better than you were the previous night? Yes. And will that mean that you're going to have slightly more hot girls in your life and slightly better relationships with them and slightly, more on your own terms and etc.? Yes. So you should do it. And then the next night, if you do the same thing, will that mean the same thing? Yes, so you should do it, right? And so who cares how long it takes when every single step of the way is massively rewarding? That makes sense? Mm-hmm. If it was like, if you had a job and this job is like you love your job and you're getting promotions and like your money's increasing every single year, are you like, you're like, I have to get to a billionaire status at this amount of time? Or are you just like, look, I'm getting fucking rich and I'm loving my life. And I'm not like constantly doing the math and being like, oh God, it's gonna take me 10 years to be a billionaire instead of 5. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Right? So the point is that every step of the way is so rewarding that you can try and do the math of how long it's gonna take, but what's the option? The option is stay on this path or get off the path. And if you're not getting off the path anyway, who the fuck cares? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Also, the problem with that mentality a little bit is that it assumes an endpoint, right? You think when you get to that level you want to get to that you're going to stop. Yeah. You're wrong. When you get to that level you get to, probably games are going to be so much more rewarding, you're going to want to do it even more, right? It's going to be even more addictive at that point and even better, right? And here's another funny thing. As you get more advanced, your progressions in terms of skill are smaller because there's just less huge errors in your game, right? There are fewer huge gaps for you to kind of fill in. However, as you get better in game, the sets that you don't get, you're very close to getting very, very often. So even though the incremental progress in your skill is very small, that incremental progress is very often the difference between not getting a set and getting a set. Right. So the difference in your results proportionately actually increases as you get better with every little bit you learn, right? And that's the crazy thing. So it actually gets almost more rewarding at an advanced level than it was at a very beginner level. It's massively rewarding because your gaps are so big, right? And then the intermediate level, it's like frustrating and slow by comparison. When you get to an advanced level, it almost like speeds up again a little bit from the intermediate level because again, you're not improving faster, but you're so close with your misses that even just a little nudge over the top makes a big difference. So that's an interesting thing as well. What I often say to people is this. If you wanted to get as good at game as I am, then you're insane and psychotic. Because you don't need to, and it takes way too long. But what you should aspire to is to be 80% as good as me. And to do that, instead of taking decades, it would take like 20% the time and effort that I put in. Right? And that's rational and reasonable. Like no human being should be as good at game as I am. It like fucking shouldn't happen. Right? I've spent way too much time on this, right? Seriously, it's almost disgusting how much time I've spent on this. And to be fair, even I as obsessed as I am and as much as I love it, I would not have spent as much time on this if it wasn't also like my means of living. Okay, so you don't want to be as good as me. And in fact, once you get to a level of about 80% as good as me, you will get more improvements from getting better in other areas of your life, getting a better lifestyle, more money, more resources, better friends, those kind of things, than you would from getting that last 20% anyway, right? Because that last 20% is really hard to get, and it's really like thin on the margins. Sure. Okay, so don't worry about being like the best fucking pickup artist in the world. That's a stupid aim. Yeah. Like actually a stupid aim. Worry about being 80% of the way there, which is not that hard to do, right? And then enjoying your life, having a great experience to bring the girls into. That's going to be way more important than the 20% anyway. In general, what you want to do is this. You want to go out often enough throughout the week that you're making it something like a daily routine. I think JP mentioned the other day, like forcing yourself to go out, like at least do one set every day. That's a good plan. I do it a little differently, but the idea of doing it regularly throughout the week is very important. Because if you do just stack a bunch of sets all one day, then you have 6 days to get rusty again and 6 days to forget that that's normal for you. Also, if you stack all your sets in one day, you're not getting a lot of introspection in between sets. So you're going out and doing a bunch of like the same thing and not thinking about it, and then you're 6 days later going to do a bunch more of the same thing. So having that I guess periodicity a little bit, having it that like you're doing something today, a little something tomorrow is really, really good. It doesn't have to be every day, I don't think. Typically, if you're doing it at least like 3 days a week, you're probably doing it often enough that it feels like part of your life rather than a huge departure, right?
But like setting 2 hours.
Something like that. So here's the other factor. So the one factor is doing it every day. And it would seem to make sense then, doing like 1 set a day is a great plan. And it is a pretty good plan. The problem with that plan though, is it requires a lot of self-discipline, because every single day, your first set is the hardest. So if you do 1 set a day, every set you do is the hardest set, right? That's a tough way to get good. If you have the willpower to do it, by all means, there's nothing wrong with it from a functional perspective, but it's fucking hard, right? It's a lot easier the second or third approach of the day, right? Or upwards from there. So what I typically suggest is do it at least 3 days a week, and then when you go out, make yourself do at least 3 sets. So that it's not all your first worst set every single time you're doing it. And it makes it a little more fun. It's a lot easier to stick with. Also, if you happen to have a busy day and you can't do it one day, you didn't break your routine, you can still just make it up another day and make sure you hit it for the week. That's a pretty typical amount, right? You want to do something every day or close to it, like something regularly throughout the week. And you want to do enough sets when you go out that it's actually an experience as opposed to just a 1 set thing. The other problem with doing 1 set a day is it's very emotionally straining, not just for the approach of the set, but from the results of the set. So if you do 1 set a day and it goes badly, well, you suck for the next 24 hours, right? If you do 1 set a day and it goes well, you're like the king of pickup, and then the next day you're like, well, I don't want to blow it by messing this set up, right? And so it's very easy to be very swingy in your results and your feelings about them, whereas if you do 3 sets, it gives you a little bit more of a rational, realistic thing, right? And as you get decent, like to an intermediate level, if you're doing 3 sets a day, probably at least one of those sets will be a number. And so you can feel like you made progress or gained something every single time you went out. So that's a very reassuring and like kind of positive feeling towards your progress. So that's why I like that. In the video that I made, I basically recommended that your minimum for getting good should be to go out 3 days a week and do 3 sets. Now that's not the optimal for getting good, but that's the minimum for like what I would suggest for getting good. Now obviously, more days helps, more sets per day helps, etc. But if you're really crunched on time.
Going out to a club like once or twice a week?
No, it's included. It's included. Yeah, so if you went out to a club twice and went out for day game once, and did 3 sets each time, you're fine. Now, that said, if you go out to a club and do 3 sets and you're already out there, you're certainly allowed to go do 6 or 7 more, and encouraged as well. I'm just talking about absolute bare minimum. Does that make sense? I mean, so that's what will happen though. There'll be some days where you'll be like tired and just want to be done, and you can leave after 3. And there'll be some days where you're doing great and you have momentum and you're having fun, and you'll go do 10. And that's the idea, right? Whereas if you do 1 every day, you'll probably end up doing 1, 1. If you do 3, sometimes you're going to do 7 or 10 or whatever, because it just gets fun. Right? And that's the idea.